All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this third episode of the Innovaud Expand web series on the topic how to manage your board during a crisis. I see that people are joining at the moment, so we'll also take these first minutes slow to allow everyone to connect and be with us in this meeting room. So today with us to discuss that topic that is a burning topic at the moment as the pandemic in the last months has influenced everyone's business. Everyone's had hard talks with their board. We have today with us Laurent Coulot, CEO of Insolight, Olga Dubey, the CEO of AgroSustain, Alexandra KARACSONYI, founder of MPG Partner Fund and also founder of Elixir Consulting, and Jean-Michel Stauffer, the innovation advisor at Innovaud. This episode is part of a series of 4 episodes that has been powered by Innovaud. You probably all know Innovaud by now. This is the place to go for innovation in the canton de Vaud. We have had 3 episodes so far. 2 episodes so far. This is the 3rd one. First one being on how to scale your Swiss-based startup globally, then a 2nd episode on how to adapt your regulatory plan, especially for life science startups. Today we'll talk on how to manage your board during a crisis, and next week our last episode will be on how to foster corporate partnerships online. You can find recordings for the first 2 episodes on venturelab.ch, and we will make sure to record this session as well if you want to watch it again. My name is Julia Borri. I work for VentureLab, a company supporting entrepreneurs all around Switzerland. We have offices in Zurich, and here I am now in Lausanne, back in the office at the EPFL Innovation Park. As I was mentioning earlier, today we'll have the chance to invite and have as guest speaker Jean-Michel Stauffer, who's an innovation advisor at Innovaud. Laurent Coulot is the CEO of Insolight. You also probably have heard about this clean tech startup that is growing strong on the EPFL campus as well. He will tell his story with Insolight, but also his tips on how to manage your board of directors, your board when you have a crisis, the one we just experienced. We will then invite Alexandra KARACSONYI for another point of view on this matter. And finally, we'll have Olga Dubey, CEO of AgroSustain, sharing her point of view. Before we enter the topic, I would like to share a short video about Innovaud and how they support entrepreneurship in the canton of Vaud. So, here we are. Just a quick check. Can Jean-Michel tell me if there is some sound? Okay, actually the video is not coming in. All right. Okay, so there is a problem with video. I will, instead of the video, ask my colleague Jean-Michel to present Innovaud.
Yes.
Thank you, Jean-Michel.
Live is always better. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to see you, to be with you this morning. Still digital. I'm really looking forward to have a face-to-face meeting, and like everybody, I imagine. Can you give me the control?
Yes, that I can do.
So I'm not going to present you Innovaud. I'm sure by now you know a bit who we are, what we do, what we offer. In case if you have interest to know more, I'm sure you can contact me or some of my colleagues. What I would like to do this morning is to give you the same like before. What I would like to give you in terms of information is a little bit the latest news, because the great news for Innovaud this year is that before the economic promotion was built of 3 different pillars. You had this service of economic promotion of innovation, and then 2 pillars were 2 associations, one called Development Economic and one called Innovaud. The first taking care of exogenous support, I mean helping international companies to come here in the canton of Vaud, and Innovaud supporting innovation in the canton. And since April, but retroactive to 1st of January this year, a new Innovaud has been created and is the merge of these 2 associations. which means that instead of having 7 people in the canton to support you, you will now have 15 people in front of you with much more experience, much more diverse experience, not only cantonal, but also international. And that will be really a real step forward for Innovaud in the coming year. In terms of missions, this historical mission where, let's say, connect was a mission for Innovaud, connecting people, helping people to connect with the ecosystem, to find the right tool where it is to support your innovation. The mission of Dev was what we call Invest, helping international companies to come here to better understand our canton, our ecosystem, and hopefully to come and install their office, their manufacturing facility here. And together we were promoting innovation, promoting a lot of support and the ecosystem. We will add 2 missions to our portfolio. The first one will be Expand. That means we will help companies in the canton to go international by taking or let's say using our know-how of the international network. And we will also add the mission called Explore. That means we will do kind of marketing and understanding a bit the international trend of technologies to better help the local companies here in the canton. So you will know more about this fusion and this merge in the coming weeks, because a new website will come, a lot of new information. But globally, if we consider our support here in the canton, we are still focusing on the same, let's say, on our historical targets, which were technical oriented or technology oriented in the domain of food and nutrition, industries and microtechnics, clean tech, IT, life science, digital. And I'm sure that one of these will fit with your activity. And we are really here to support you. Now, in terms of our theme today, how to manage your board during a crisis. You all know that innovation is not only about technology, and that to create a company, you cannot just work on the technology. You have, of course, to work on market, on business model. I mean, it's key in terms of development of your companies. And you have to work also on your team, on human. And by merging these 3 different domains, you see that different axes of innovation are possible. And in the middle of all this, and to support these different activities, you are, of course, the direction of your company with the CEO, but you have the chef d'orchestre, or the conductor, which is very key to support a company, and which is the board. And the collaboration between direction and board, the contribution of the board, the communication you have to manage and to have with the board is extremely important on a daily basis, of course, but probably even more during this period of crisis. And this is a little bit the theme we wanted to highlight today and to propose to address. And I'm really looking forward to hear our different presentations. And I would like one more to thank Venture Lab for their support and their great contribution. And of course, if you need to follow us, sorry, one more slide. You can stay connected. Our new association will be named Innovaud. So if you are registered to our web newsletter, to our website, to our Twitter and LinkedIn, you will be able to follow us in the future. Thank you very much. And
thank you very much, Jean-Michel. Thank you for these insights. I would now very much like to invite Laurent Coulot to share his screen and share also his story and his tips and how you handle the situation in the past month with your board. So I'll stop sharing my screen and invite you to share yours.
Sure. Can everyone see my screen?
It works perfectly, and we can hear you.
Great. So good morning, everyone. Happy to join this Innovaud Expand webinar. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Innovaud, and as well, Julia from Venture Lab. We'll share the experience we had at Insolight. I guess it's different in every startup. So just trying to, see how it went for us. I don't think there's a general rule. Maybe before starting, a few words about Insolight, just to give you a bit of context on where we stand currently and what kind of situation we had to deal with. So we are currently about 15 members with the same number of industrial partners. So we kind of have an outsourcing strategy for working on industrial topics. And we are focusing on designing, selling solar panels and recurrent services associated. The company was founded in September 2015, so we are in typical hardware development cycles that are quite long, where you start from the idea. We are currently at the industrialization phase, and we will soon enter commercialization. I would say finally, it takes time to develop everything, and also, of course, lots of IP involved in this venture. And what do we exactly do? So we build a new generation of solar modules that you can see there. They are on a EPFL rooftop. They are based on a completely different approach with concentrating optics. And the result of that, you can see on the right, is a record efficiency. You typically see on blue the curve of PV module efficiency until now from 1990. And we got kind of a disruptive jump at 29% efficiency. We had lots of coverage. It's of course, with climate change, a hot topic for the population. And we also got awarded recently a grant from the EU to build a pilot assembly line with partners. So that's a bit where we currently are, doing lots of hardware with external partners to build the first series of products, of modules. And that's just one slide about the market, let's say, or the application. We go in a very targeted market, which is called agrivoltaics, where the modules are mounted either on fields or on top of crops in greenhouses. And there are very technical and specific reasons why to go to this market. It's because the current solar module fail to address this segment, and it's kind of a hot topic in the industry. So as always, for the market entry, we try to really find a sweet spot where we can apply a premium pricing and find early adopters for a new product. And you see all the features. It's all about power, cost of the module, ease of mounting, and reliability. It's not very emotional at the end. It's a very rational decision of installing those solar modules. Now, a few words about the team. Here you have a picture with the current team. Just before the COVID, we were lucky enough to have a recent picture before the COVID, and as well as the boards. And I would say, so we have two board members, Alan Rosling, that was previously managing director at Tata, and also founder of Kiran Energy, a big solar developer in India, and Rainer Isenrich, which is a bit the similar profile for Europe, a CEO of Edison Power, lots of experience in solar. And our InnoSwiss coach, Daniel, of course, and Marie Vora, our advisor, all those people, I will talk about it now, were key in this crisis, and especially the board, because we were, of course, in charge to solve the different issues. So I will explain you a bit how it went now. And also feel free to ask your questions on the chat, I guess. So moving to the topic of crisis management, you know, we didn't see it coming, I would say, very early. Although Daniel, our InnoSwiss coach, spent 25 years in China, and he came to me in February and told me everything will be shut down soon. I told him, "Ah, you're crazy. This is not happening." And he told me it's what is happening right now in China. He had many friends there. He knew a bit in the inside information. So that was, I would say, the first warning before everything in Switzerland got the confinement start. And once this started, the Rainer called me actually one of the first day and explained me very simply that the responsibility of the health of the employee was of course the most important thing, but it was also a legal obligation of the board and the management to implement those rules. So the order of priorities that we defined was very simple. It was from the most pressing or urgent thing to solve, like for the next day, up till the midterm or short-term financial risk that we need to cover. And it's very interesting because I had the feeling that, you know, it's a crisis, you can run around and directly look at financial support and so on. But actually for us, the two first points were key. So health, I think, is obvious for everyone, but also maintaining activities. Lots of people told me we go for partial unemployment and so on, but in our case, for a venture that don't live on the revenues and do a lot of R&D and product development, it makes a lot of sense to try to maintain activities because you have a cost of opportunity. If you stop your development, you will just get delayed by a similar time, and this will decrease your attractivity probably to investors. So all our mind was about how can we maintain the max of our activities without impeding the health of the employees and having everyone comfortable, because you don't want people to come by obligation and feeling a bit unsafe. So really that was the core of the discussion. And then before applying for support, again, trying to evaluate a bit the impacts on three different topics. One was on operations. We were assembling our first batch of production in Spain. We were supposed to go there, so everything got canceled. The supplier got shut down. So we had to think how to resolve that. On the financing round, we are still in the closing of our Series A, and we were right in the middle of at that time of the terms negotiation. So really not ideal timing. And finally, on commercial activities, we were discussing first purchase orders with solar developers, so big energy companies. And typically, the first thing they will cut in the budget are innovation projects. So we were also a bit cautious on that side to analyze what's going on. And finally, the financial risk, and the board really insisted, and I think they are right also today, to go worst case scenario. No point of trying to evaluate the base case that is currently seen. It makes a lot of sense to go directly to a worst case where you cancel all the revenues, you keep your burning rate, and you see exactly how many months you have left of financial viability. And another thing is we didn't do like a big board meeting at the beginning, rather do it some week by week, because I think for everyone, the situation, or even for the population, it was changing every week, almost sometimes every 2 or 3 days. So there is no point of planning well ahead before the guidelines are released, and rather do lots of small calls to make sure that we have the latest information. So that was the phase one, really much into analysis, and came phase two, which I called contingency plan, and basically validating what the management defined as key actions, and we did that during the board meeting. So typically for the office, we came with the idea of limiting to 5 people, even before the rule was applied for everyone, and let only the people that needs to access the workshop or the tools, and all the others had to work remotely. And also trying to install safety rules and safety equipment to protect everyone and make sure that you don't have people at risk coming to the office. And it went actually it was well received by our employees. And I think overall the productivity remained as, I would not say as good as it would have been normally, but almost maybe 80%, 90% productivity was maintained thanks to that. And the other thing, the big decision we took was to bring back all the production tools we had at partners in Switzerland in our offices, which meant that we basically removed our offices to put all the production equipment there, which you know, it was not such a big decision, but basically there is even now not so much of an office space. But it made sense because then we were not relying on external partners lying in other countries than Switzerland, where we didn't know how the situation evolved. So that was also one of the key decisions. Updated everyone that we'll get 2 months delay, more or less, due to some supply issues, and we took this time to solve other problems, to take a bit of advance on other topics. For the investors, you know, I think we got also lucky, but they didn't come back on the terms. We could move on with the round. Now we have the closing plan in 2 weeks. So I know it was a very unstable situation, and also for them because they need to raise their funds, but it's still, I think if you call everyone and explain the situation, and what we do here is a bit longer term than a few months, you can try to limit the impact on the daily financing. And the last thing was also with customers, we were really worried on that side. What our CBO, David, did is basically calling all the ones we had direct contact and explaining them where we stand, what was the current production planning, and exactly what is the status on our side. And I think it had a benefit impact because then they said, yes, we can keep on the purchase orders discussions. The situation is clear. And it was probably the easiest way to solve it on that side rather than trying to hide any issues or not communicating would have been probably the worst. And finally, on the financial risk, and this one, I think it's still, of course, looming. The first thing was killing all the unnecessary expenses. In our case, lots of hardware, so it's kind of easy. We don't have so much. We have about 50% salaries, 50% development costs. We cut all part of the development costs that were not urgent. We required the partial unemployment and obtain it in case we wanted to ask for it. But again, we told the employees, try to work maximum you can. And actually, we will not request it because everyone could work almost to full capacity. So it's kind of satisfying that we don't have to request it even because we could maintain the daily work. And the last thing, I think it's still ongoing, is about if everything goes wrong or with the round or we need a backup for our cash flow, what kind of loans and what kind of financing bridge we can obtain. And there it's more about knowing exactly what the options are and the conditions. Normally, as we're doing a 5 million financing round, we will not request it, but it's always good to have backup because things, especially in the financing world, are changing very drastically from day to day. And then coming from the board, again, sitting in a board meeting for about 3-4 hours to discuss those topics are extremely helpful. Yes, you could see, especially on the financial side of things, they are probably more conservative than us, and it's probably good for the company that they are more conservative. Maybe as a young entrepreneur, we tend to be a bit too optimistic sometimes. It's good to have people a bit more, let's say, that have had some failures maybe, and some that Alan went through the SARS in Hong Kong, so he knows all those things a bit better. Yeah, that's a concrete example of the office. So that was where the team was sitting before. As you see now, we are filling it with equipment, and there is still almost a piece of equipment coming every day. So it's not an office anymore, which also, you know, push a bit for. We extended now the office space to another room. We encourage home office, so we can adapt as a small company to this kind of adversity, and it will probably get resolved in a few months. So it's something we can live with. And finally, maybe some takeaways, again, purely based on our experience. For us, it was more than managing their expectations or trying to report the situation and waiting for the criticism. It was more as a teamwork. I felt like the board was kind of involved, and it's also the role. If you look at the legal aspect of a board member, they have to help the company in this type of situation. So in general, I think you can involve them in kind of a management extension. It doesn't have to be just a reporting and the check. And another thing, I think, again, it seems quite obvious, but the gray area experience in those crises is important because first they are facing a similar issue with their own company. Like Rainer, he has his company running, his CEO. So, you know, we could exchange on all the subsidies and all the support and our just a peer-to-peer exchange. And same, again, they often know many startups, especially if they're involved in several boards, so they can give you a bit of perspective on your situation. How is, in our case, they were, okay, it's maybe not that bad as you have a financing round ongoing that will be closed. So trying to give a bit of perspective was also key. One thing that I believe is, and the board also insisted last time, is we're not yet done, especially on the long-term effects, such as customer losses or customer cutting some budget. We are pure B2B, and you are very dependent on their budget and their decision. So again, be on the commercial objective, be conservative and careful enough to make sure that the customers have themselves secured their budget to buy, in our case, the first SOAR installations for pilots. And yes, for the financing, initially in January, we were thinking we can raise only 4 million and wait for the next inflection point to increase valuation. And now we are really not in that mood of playing the game of doing smaller rounds and trying to increase valuation, because it's a difficult situation for raising money, and we don't know how long it will stand. Maybe it will get better soon, maybe not. And it's better probably to back a bit the finances for at least 2 years, I would say, to avoid having the side effect of the pandemic coming in the next round. So trying really that our Series B, if we do a Series B, it doesn't happen once you have the consequences of the pandemic. And yeah, if I take a general conclusion, it seems that we didn't focus too much on subsidies and state support, more on our activities, and this activity-centric thing, we are very happy with it at the moment because the schedule is not that bad, could have been much worse. And yeah, so we are currently happy, but still careful. And again, the board really pushes us to be careful for the future. I hope it was interesting, and I'm glad to answer any questions. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Laurent, for this presentation. I would like to open the floor for questions now. We have the chance to have quite a few entrepreneurs in the room, some with also hardware projects and products. So if anyone has a question, you can simply raise your hand and unmute and put on your camera and ask a question. I don't know, I see Thomas, Agnes, if you have any questions, now is the time. Else, I would like to start with one, Laurent, because I think you did a move that is quite bold to move your production to Switzerland, like you were supposed to build everything out there. Was that a move that was advised by your board? Was that like a conversation when you were like, okay, let's do that move? Or was it a decision you took on your own and you kind of announced it to the board?
It was more the latter. So you know, the team came up and said the people developing the assembly tools, it's a very big company in Spain, will be shut down at least until beginning of June, which is exactly what happened. They are reopening now. And it was at that time, end of March, and we were like, whoa, we were supposed to get 10 people there in April of our team, almost the full engineering team. And the engineers said, or the people in charge said, we should bring back the equipment, especially as part of the equipment was delivered to them, so we can just redirect the deliveries. And so we had to decide quite quickly. I informed the board. They said, yeah, sure, it seems like the most pragmatic approach at the moment, just to not delay everything. And it's also, it's not only about the board in that case, it's about the team accepting to do the assemblies without external support, which is extremely challenging on the tech side. So for us, it was more, we are more caring about the team in that case than about the board, although the board give their approval, of course.
So you seem to have quite a good relationship with the board. So it's not like pressure, and so you are helping each other. Is it always been like that, or is it also through the crisis now they decided to?
You know, it's a matter of trust. I mean, they ask us, what do you think? We explain what we think, and they say, yeah, go for it, because I accept if we do something very stupid. But in that case, again, the spirit was, let's not accept to take delays. Let's try to maintain things, although it's a bit more challenging. And maybe also a bit more costly. Let's try to do something and not having people sitting at home, not doing the work. And I think they were completely in line with that philosophy also.
Thank you very much, Laurent. I believe that you had to.
Yeah, I got 5 minutes extra if there is a question.
I think that's nice of you.
I have.
Yes, please, Agnes.
I have a question. Yeah. Did you discuss about the second wave, and what are your action plan for a second wave? How do you plan for the end of the year?
Yes. So we discussed that internally, and honestly, it's for me it's a topic we don't master at all. Not many people, I guess, master it, even the government. So the approach is a bit to be prepared again. If there is a second wave, what do we do? And it's probably the same logic of not working too much with external partners at that time and bringing back stuff under our control.
Okay.
Switzerland will close completely, then we can do anything. But as long as there is this, like the similar rules, I think they will apply the similar rules that were applied. And in that case, we can still function.
So just because on one of your first slide, you showed that you're outsourcing the manufacturing. So is there a pivoting in your business model because of this now? No,
not on the long term. So what we are doing currently, cannot give too much details. Initially, we were doing with Spanish partners, thinking EU is fully open and they are very good partners there for doing the assemblies. Now we are finding a second source for the assembly in Switzerland. Okay. Just to have 2 geographies covered. So
diminishing the risk by having 2 types of suppliers.
Yes, exactly. At least ready to activate and that knows the product and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Agnes, CEO of Mobot, by the way. So thank you for joining this training. I see a couple of hands. So I would like to invite Martin. You can unmute. Martin Hendon, you can unmute and yes, ask your question.
Thank you, Laurent, for sharing your story. Very often in startups and in small, medium-sized companies, the roles between shareholder, board member, and employee are quite often mixed and really unclear. How have you experienced these different roles during this crisis in your company?
No, that's absolutely right. We don't have the same relationship in the board or in the shareholders than a listed company, for instance. That's clear. I think the board, you know, they are not in the daily operations. They are more there to give their feedback and approval and eventually ideas on managing the crisis, and they are available for advices, let's say. And you look at the board regulation and the status of the company anyway, the CEO is in charge usually. So it's, if you look at board regulations, the CEO has to implement. The board is really there to check and validate, basically. And this structure was still very true in our case. They were not in the office or trying to help solving things. So I think the roles were differentiated. And for the shareholders, I would say they were a bit external to it. although checking, of course, a lot the reporting and the financial situation.
Thank you.
And we have one more question by Esmeralda Megali. Can I ask you to please unmute?
Thank you, Olivier. I had a question regarding fundraising during the crisis, and especially B2B, when you're B2B and you have to make some projections about your customer or future customers' ability to recover from the crisis. How did you do that? And how did you actually convey this information to people to keep them excited about the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's still an ongoing challenge, to be honest. I would make a differentiation between existing leads, both for investors and customers, and business development or creation of new leads. I think it's a very hard time to do creation of new business leads. It's not the same if you cannot meet people, you cannot attend fairs and conferences. For the ones you already know and you already met, and I'm talking both investors and customers, I think the best way just to communicate, be a bit candid in the way you share your, transparent in the way you share your situation. I think there is no need to hide anything. Everyone accepts that you take delay. What they like is that you tell, I take that many weeks or months of delay. This is the new delivery schedule, or for the financing, this is the current impact on the business, and you list the different impacts. And they appreciate also the transparency in some ways. And yeah, I think that's the best way to do, is really take the phone and talk to customers that at least to try to save those and keep it alive in this period.
Thank you, Laurent. We will need to move on. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with us today. Now I would like to welcome our second speaker on the topic, Alexandra KARACSONYI. You are invited to share your screen. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Julia, and congratulations on pronouncing my last name right. It's not an easy one. Hi everyone, very happy to have a few minutes with all of you, and I would like to share my screen, so just give me a brief minute. Okay, here we go. So, quick presentation. I have many caps in my life, and this is what I like to do. Just
a quick, Alexandra, you can put on full screen. I think then we can, that will be,
give me a
at the bottom. I think that's easier.
Give me a sec.
So the presentation mode is like at the bottom, it's like the little square.
Okay.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem, of course. So very briefly about myself. So 3 pillars of activity. First one is consulting and training in the innovation domain. So I help organizations of different types, sizes and sectors transform themselves and adapt to the new realities of the market. I'm very active in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I'm a business angel. I'm a senior business advisor for a private equity fund based abroad. And I'm also a co-founder of a smaller investment fund called MPD SME Capital One, focusing on SMEs, so not especially startups. And I also a university lecturer, so with Stanford University, the École de Gestion in Geneva, and various other institutions. So as you can see, I have a broad scope of interest. And today I would like to tell you, to give you a few pieces of advice on how to deal with your board, because at the end of the day, your board is made of human beings. And if there is a common link between all my activities, this is really to be human-centered. So my first recommendation is to use empathy. Why empathy? Because simply you board members are, as I was mentioning before, of course, human beings. We tend to forget that too often in the business world. We tend to think that people are only rationals and objective, but there is a lot of subjectivity involved. And by having practiced design thinking for many, many years, this is really what I've seen as a common denomination factor in any organization. When it's a normal time, I would say it's not a big deal when emotions are kept at bay. But in terms of crisis, it's important to deal with emotions. So my recommendation is really to identify your board members' emotions, to, of course, not ignore those emotions. And your goal as a leader will be to help your board members feel better. So I prepared a small Mentimeter survey that I'm going to share now. And I will ask you to connect to mentimeter.com and to enter the following code, 959229, and to assess quickly your first level gut feeling, right? What are your board members' emotions? You can enter more than one answer, and we are going to, hopefully this works because I see voting is closed, which I don't like, of course. So give me just, if you prefer, why is it closed?
Could you maybe repeat, Alexandra, the number?
Yeah, it's 959229. So now I would like to understand why this is closed, because this wasn't.
So now you're sharing your presentation, which means you're not sharing your screen
Exactly.
entirely. So maybe if you...
Yes. So now, hold on. Voting is closed, which is very interesting. I don't understand why this is closed. Okay, let's do something else if this not works. Technology is always a challenge, and of course it always fails where it shouldn't. So what I suggest you do is you just use a chat to type in the emotions you have either felt or you are still feeling in your board. So we get a feeling of what are the dominant emotions.
Alexandra, can you hear
Yes.
me? Yeah, this
Yes.
is Michael from Depsys. Sorry to interrupt you.
No
Maybe
problem.
I can help in. I'm also using Mentimeter.
Okay.
Maybe you can, if you look at the Mentimeter page.
Yes.
On the right side, you have a button called Share.
Okay.
When you click on Share, and then the first button called Expand, you can open up again your. It should be on close. You can make it available again.
Ah, okay.
If it helps.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
Welcome.
Is it open now, this Mentimeter survey? And I'm sorry, I don't want to lose more time. So if this doesn't work, we just switch to conversation. So this should be working. Can you all access it or no? No, it's still closed. Okay, let's forget about it. Okay, let's just use a conversation. It's gonna be friendlier anyway, so. So can you all share freely as what you have seen in the different boards, the emotions that were displayed or not, because very often they're not displayed, but they're still present. So we have a few answers. So we have worry, stress, mostly worry. Okay, any other answer? Nervosity, yes, very close to stress. Trust, that's a good one, that's a positive one. Any new input? Now we're done. Everybody agrees on what have been answered. Tension, anxiety. Thank you, Thomas. Exactly. Okay, so feel free to continue submitting your answers while I move on. So yes, there is tension, there is stress, there is worry, and there is a reason, of course, right? Many reasons. Reason is that obviously we are going through a very deep crisis. You have actually two levels of crisis. You have the sanitary one, and then you have the economic one that, you know, most experts keep re-examining. And as you can see every day in the news, the prognostics become worse and worse as the days come by. So it's normal they are stressed. Also, one thing to remember is that board members in Switzerland are personally liable on their own fortune, on their own goods. So it's not only their reputation or their professional activity or their salary, because there is no salary that's at stake, right? This is really their personal wealth in many situations as well, okay? So there are good reasons to be worried. So how can you help them? You can help them by making sure you help them understand. What I'm saying here is board members, as Laurent was mentioning before, are not in the daily business. It's normal, it's not their job, okay? However, given the depth and the complexity of this crisis, they need to understand better the exact impact it will have on your business and to be able to build future scenarios, to co-create scenarios with you, okay? This is, for instance, the stepped plan that Laurent was referring to, but this is also, you know, splitting into short-term, mid-term, and long-term, whether the business model will be impacted, whether the plant revenues will be impacted. Okay, the idea is to bring them solutions and not additional problems. When you build scenarios and you present them to your board, you bring them a choice between different solutions. And then, of course, it will be up to them to discuss which one will be better and to help you, you know, make sure that the ones chosen are being implemented in the best possible situation and conditions. However, don't come to them with more problems. They have plenty enough on their plate. Come with solutions. Trust. Agnes mentioned it as a positive emotion in the chat. And trust was also very much mentioned in the first presentation with Laurent. Trust is everything. It's very important to be transparent. It's very important to communicate often, like Laurent highlighted. And I would say last thing, be honest with your own limitations. Nobody is a superhero, and this is not what is expected from anyone, okay? So it's way better to say, I don't know, rather than to pretend I know, and then be on the wrong side, because at the end of the day, it will show and it will be discovered at some point. So it's important to remain true to oneself and to not pretend we can do more than what we can. We're all humans, okay? And remember, trust is a muscle. It's hard to build, but it's easy to lose. So actually, my point of view is that the very difficult times we are currently going through, and we will still go through in probably the months and even years to come, is that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for leaders, for CEOs, for all the C-levels. It's an opportunity to shine and to demonstrate leadership, even more than usual. Why demonstrate leadership? Because you're in charge. There is no time to complain. There is no time or no place to really ask for impossible things. You're in charge. Show it. You know, use bigger shoes and project yourself in the future, because once the crisis is over, the board members will remember your leadership demonstration. And by the way, because it's not directly linked to the board question, but a crisis like this is also a great opportunity to make your business healthier. Just kill the zombies. You know, the zombies, those are those projects that have been lingering on, and you were not sure whether you wanted to do them. There were not clear winners, not clear losers. Just kill all that. It's a waste of time. It's an opportunity to do a spring cleanup. Do it. And your business will be healthier, you will feel better, and your board will trust you even more. So how do you arrange all those 4 recommendations? They actually feed each other. Well, if you use empathy to understand your audience, and your audience in that case are your board members, you will know better how to make them feel better, how to build this trust, and how to guide them. So it will become easier to guide them, to work towards this trust building. And then at the end of the day, you will get the rewards from all this maybe additional and intangible work, which is to seize the opportunity to demonstrate your leadership. And maybe as well, you will increase your self-confidence in yourself, which is usually a quite common problem, even among leaders. So by that way, you will create a virtuous circle. So this is how to turn a problem, a big problem actually, into a potential opportunity if you do it right. If you have any questions beyond this session, because I know time is limited, feel free to reach out to me. And by the way, if you're interested in understanding more what I do in terms of design thinking and change management, I'm running a series of webinars starting June 15th. Still time, last minute to register. And I would love to have you on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexandra.
So I give you back the screen, Julia.
You can leave that on for a minute.
Okay. Thank you.
We will take a couple of questions, and before we move on to our last speaker, everyone in the room, thanks also for sharing your in the chat how your board is feeling. I think it was quite interesting to see that there is a common denominator here, which seems to be stress and anxiety. Is there any questions in the room on that topic? Esmeralda, your hand is still up. Do you have another question? Maybe.
Sorry, no, sorry, my hand.
All right. Okay, so this was crystal clear. You have the position, Alexandra, of also being in the board, and how would you say that how can people build that trust regarding you as a board member if they don't know what's going to happen? So there is I think there's this tension between bluffing and pretending to know what's going to happen and take very clear decision, or as Laurent mentioned earlier, just accepting that we don't know about the second wave, we don't know what's going to happen, but this is not really trust building in a way. So how do you manage that?
It's not necessarily trusting the future, because as you mentioned, we don't know how the future will look like, and nobody knows. And I would add even less experts that have been wrong all along. in their predictions, I would say. And I tend to be a super risk-averse person in terms of being super careful about what is being said and what is being shared and whether it's real or not. Now, what I mean with trust is a relationship between two people, okay, between, for instance, the CEO and the board member, but also in between the different board members. This is a relationship that ideally should already pre-exist to some extent before the crisis, but has the need and the potential to be strengthened. How do you do that, concretely speaking? By being transparent, not over-promising. Over-promises always turn back. If you're transparent about what you know, what you can do, what you don't know, and what you cannot do, it's called basically a situational audit, okay? And it's based on facts. It's not based on assumptions or based on subjectivity. It's an objective audit, okay? And this is a very good working base. What I was mentioning before is, you know, no one is a superhero. Board members are not superheroes. CEOs are not superheroes. We're all humans, all trying to do the best we can. And I think the intention by showing we're doing the best we can is very important in building trust. It's okay to fail. I know it's a taboo word in Europe, failure, okay? We are very adverse to failure in Europe. If you cross the ocean and you go to the US, and I'm working a lot with US clients, actually failing is a good thing because you learn things. Okay, the issue we have in Europe, it's such a taboo word that when we fail, we hide it and we don't learn anything from it. Okay, and if you look at one of the principles of design thinking is fail fast to learn fast. So I'm not saying, of course, to purposefully fail. What I'm saying is that try the best you can. It will be clear to your board members that you are trying with your best heart and efforts. And yes, you are not always going to succeed, but that's part of life. But you are going to learn from that. Everybody will learn from that.
Thank you, Alexandra. In the interest of time, we'll jump on to our last speaker, Olga Dubey, CEO of AgroSustain, company active now in the agri-tech sector. I think we can call it like that. I think, Olga, if you can share your screen, that would be splendid.
Thank you very much.
You just raised some funds, and you also just have a big collaboration with Migros, I heard. So quite an exciting time for AgroSustain, and it's really nice to have you today with us.
Thank you. So actually, I felt like our story is very similar to the stories that Laurent was sharing with you. So I think we will still hear quite a lot of overlaps, but I hope I can still add something new. So AgroSustain is a company which is 2 years old. We've been officially created in May 2018, and our mission is to replace chemical solutions used in agriculture by natural ones. And our first product is the one which is protecting the food from getting moldy, and the second one which is extending the freshness of crops. And the reason why we work on it is, I think, very familiar to most of us, is that severe negative impacts quite often of the chemical solutions which we have to eat when they're being treated on our crops, or which we're applying in the fields, and then we're having negative impact on the environment and the animals. And the vision of AgroSustain is to develop effective biological solutions which are not harming the environment, but still providing a cost-effective sources of use for the farmers, so we are not going to significantly increase the cost of the foods which we're still consuming, and by still having a good impact on the environment. And I think it's very important when you start talking about both in the crisis to highlight what kind of team you have to go through this crisis and where your key assets are. So in our case, we are 9 people. We have 5 people specifically dedicated for the research and development. And I should say that we were very lucky that when the COVID hit, our building wasn't closed. We had to do quite a lot of changes in terms of workload, but we still could have access to the laboratories and the commercial team. There we really had no challenges because we were practicing actually work from home quite often, because when you go to meetings with clients, it doesn't really matter whether you go from the office or from the home. And for the board of directors, there are 4 people. So 2 co-founders, me and Silva, and we have 1 independent board member who has a strong experience in the field of crop protection and who was also working in Syngenta previously, Alangun. And the second board member, Stefan, he's also a co-founder and CEO of Tupot. It's a really cool investment vehicle in Zurich. If you're doing fundraising, I would recommend you to contact them. And he also has really strong experience in sales. And for us, it was very much useful asset to have to understand how to structure our first sales and how to contact our clients. For me, I was split the COVID hit on the 3 phases. I think the first one, it was just like when the whole closing happened. I can't say it was very unexpected, to be fair. I mean, just before it, we flew over to the US, and already there we could see some breaks that something was coming out. It was mid-February. Then in the early March, we started to have even stronger feelings that something was going really wrong. So when suddenly the country got closed, for me, it was more shocking that people suddenly took it like a stress, because for the first 2 weeks, I was receiving almost no emails, when before the crisis, you was getting like 60, 70 emails per day. And then, of course, the first thing was to put a safeguard on a place to protect the team members and to be sure that we can have a real sufficient amount of space between people. And here we had quite a lot of support from our law firm, who actually provided us also guidance how we should organize the workforce, what we should offer to our employees, and that was really helpful. And the other part was also applying for partial unemployment to secure some funding for the company, and of course also to take care that people still can continue some work. In addition, it was really crucial to improve the communications, because before the crisis goes, you're like, well, we can meet every day in the office. What's the point to do some kind of team meetings online, whatever? And then suddenly the crisis hits and you're like, okay, let's go for a new software. So let's try to make sure that the connection works. The first week was a bit challenging. We tried different options, and now finally, and then a week later, we found some that was working very effectively, and that was great. And then the last one was, of course, doing cost cuts, because when you're just in the beginning of the crisis, you don't know what's going to happen. We were in the beginning of our Serie A round. In the first weeks, investors were still totally on. They were like, oh, it's going to pass, don't worry, it's going to be fine. So we're like, okay, let's hope for the best. And then we had the second wave in the mid-April, when people realized that actually things were not going much better. And that was the point when we started to feel that there was a financial crisis that we already heard about that started pretty heavily. The VC suddenly stopped communicating. They were all focusing on supporting their companies, portfolio companies. And we could feel like there was quite a strong reduction in the investments. In addition, we were talking to some of the investors with whom we were already in early discussions, and they told us, hey guys, valuation is too high. You know, now we have so many different offerings. Everyone asked for discounts, proposing as discounts 40 to 60%. And I was like, well, you know, it's not like COVID changed anything in our business, but you still have the same offering in a way, but you still have to adjust and propose them something appealing for them. And in addition, we had to think about new strategies, because I think fundraising for startups who are heavily involved into R&D and when taking 3 to 5 years to put the first product on the market, it's really important to know how fast can you reach this market. And when you start feeling that something is going wrong with the funding, you need to start searching for alternatives and to see what can you do to protect the company and to de-risk it a bit. And I think the good part of the COVID was actually that it gave us time. I mean, just to sit and maybe to think and to analyze and reposition the current stage of the company. And for us, it was very important because we had finally time to establish very valuable collaboration with the companies who were active in slightly different fields, and to merge the forces and to decide, okay, let's put additional product on the market, which can be registered much sooner, meaning that we can have revenues within 1.5 years now, and not anymore 3 to 5 years. And I would just really recommend you that I think everything should always have positive sides and negative sides. So maybe focusing only on negatives, I know it's hard sometimes, but you should always try to find something optimistic in all those things. And surprisingly, once we were able to reposition the company a bit more, de-risk it a bit more, I was like, we can't really approach new investors because people were still a bit locked down supporting their companies. But I was like, well, we had some investors with whom we were already in contact before. And we started talking to them, and they were all, I think, pretty surprised because, you know, if you go to an investor who already knows you and you tell him, I'm dying, we don't have cash, I think it's nothing new because everyone comes to them with the same thing. But if you go to them and say, hey, there is a company, we did that, they're kind of starting to look at you differently. And maybe it's something that is called, they start to value you much more. And in this case, you can rebuild relationships that originally might look like seem to be lost, but actually they never lost. You can always build it again. And about the board, I think our board is very optimistic board. I was much more stressed than they were. But maybe it's also because they were not really at the execution role. For us, it was more like telling the team, now you reduce your hours, and then you feel like, okay, who is going to do the work? And then you realize that your suppliers are out, that because of the border controls, things are moving so much slower, and sometimes you can't really get the reagents you need. But in addition, each time I was going to the board, I never went to say, hey, we have problems. Of course, we had a lot of problems, but I tried to say also, this is what we thought with the management team, how we can actually solve it. And it was nice because you come to them, you have different ideas, and they tell you, maybe you can focus on that, maybe you can focus on this. But together, when you have a joint brain power activities, it actually was really helpful. And also much more supportive. You don't feel so lonely anymore. And I think for founders, sometimes we take it so personally that you feel it's all like goes on you, but actually you need to realize that people around you are also willing to support you. And of course, the other thing was to adjust the fundraising strategy. And I think it's great that Canton and Confederation decided to support the startups these days. But in addition to that, I think you still need to leverage quite a lot on the investors and hoping that by showing them that you are strong enough and that you can get over this crisis, they will be there to support you as well. And this is a positive part of the COVID that at least we personally learned quite a lot. So we learn how to work from home in an effective way because, you know, quite often, usually when you talk to people, you have two groups. Some who tell you, I love working from home, and another tell you, we hate working from home. But now suddenly everyone knows how to work from home and how to stay focused and effective, which is great. The other part is that team spirit had grown up quite a lot. I mean, people feel like you are suddenly becoming all one. And like in our case, when the R&D team had to switch, they were quite a lot overlapping in their activities. And that's what made them bind much stronger. And we really had started to build team spirit. And also it gives you time to discover new opportunities, as I told you earlier, as well as to attract new or old investors by convincing them that you're actually worth it. So I think that's it on my side. Thank you very much for your time. And I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. It was really, really interesting and quite positive, which is nice for a change. I feel like we managed to end this on quite a good note here. I saw the beginning of a question in the chat, but not end. So I was wondering. Okay, that's not really a question. Anyone in the room would like to jump in?
Our registration didn't get short, unfortunately. Not that this were our core product, but what we just basically did, we had our core product, which was a fungicide, and depending on the geography, it can take you for Europe, for example, 5 years to get approval when you get over all the toxicological studies and everything else. But then in parallel, we launched a collaboration with another company who had a coating, and for coating it takes only 12 to 18 months to get a registration. That's why I said it was getting shorter, at least for second product.
I have a question, sorry. Olga, on one of your slides, you mentioned that you started looking at opportunities on how to de-risk the business. Can you comment on this?
This is actually, you know, I mean, when you are really biotech startup, I know, Agnes, you're doing great with your 3D printing and that you can do production of your products yourself. But in our case, we had to leverage quite a lot on the other parties, because in our case, we are developing the antifungal product, but then we are working with a partner to do registration of it. And we have to hope that investors will give us cash to live further, to de-risk it further. And then it's all about basically fighting to convince everyone to help you and to do it further. But you know that the core success of the startup is basically the sooner you can do revenue generation, the better it is. And that's what we were focusing on, trying to see, can we do something else that we can bring to the same clients that we already have established a network with sooner? And that's actually how we came up with our new product, which is a coating, leveraging on this side of work. Because I think that our core strength is innovation and agility. So from what I like to learn quite often, when you talk to your clients, they tell you, do you have that? Do you have this? Do you have that? Quite often you don't have any of that. But then you're like, can I have any of that actually to start doing the revenue generation faster? And if you can, this actually opens you a lot of doors.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Do we have any more questions?
They ask by register for the partner. Yeah. Because it's more the company who is assisting us in product registration, because as we're running a fungicide, you need to work with accredited firms to run also studies under GLP and GMP, and that's why actually we are doing it with a service provider.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left. Is there any more questions in the room? For Olga, also for Alexandra or Jean-Michel? I think now we're reaching the end of this session, so we also can just also general questions or general tips. I think
Martin Edman is asking for a question.
Jean-Michel, I think you're mute now.
Martin?
Yeah, I have a question maybe for you, Jean-Michel. As the federal government and the government of Canton de Vaud, they wanted to give subsidies to startups. Are you aware of how many startups actually use this possibility to have financial help?
I have a rough number of registered startups, but doesn't mean that everyone was eligible, but it is around 100 companies who have asked for support in the Canton of Vaud, which is a very large number compared to other cantons, where we see more like 10 to 15 in some other cantons. So very high level of demands, but we know that in the Canton of Vaud we have a big family of technology startups. So yeah, it's ongoing and it's going very well.
So the Canton de Vaud is very generous, actually, in Switzerland.
I mean, Canton of Vaud is supporting 30% of the cautionnement, with 60% coming from the Confederation, and we announced that we were ready to allocate 20 million plus 40 potentially from the Confederation, which means that potentially we have 60 million to support loans to startups.
Thank you.
Well, the canton also have a very high number of startups compared with other cantons. So the fact that you had 100+ applications is also relative to the number of startups.
Exactly.
Maybe a small question on my side. This is Michael from Depsys. Maybe for Alexandra, you know, when you deal with board members, you maybe must react differently if you are dealing with a strategic board than a financial board, right? So I'm just
I agree
maybe
with you.
having your point of view concerning, you know, how should we, because Debsy's board is mainly financially,
Like many boards.
yeah, exactly. 3 venture capital, 1 bank, 1 family office, and so on.
Yeah.
So maybe the empathy, you know, for a financial investors is in the P&L. It's not, not, you know, in another place. So do you have any tips and tricks?
Yeah, actually, you're bringing a very important topic. Boards is usually, but especially in Switzerland, are usually not very diversified in terms of backgrounds and competencies. And this, especially in the current crisis, this is going to be a problem. Why? Now, well, starting yesterday, the newspaper started to compare the current economic crisis with the one of the 1870. But up until yesterday, most newspapers were comparing this crisis with the one of 2008 in terms of intensity. What most newspapers, especially the mass market ones, haven't really explained, and I think it's key to understand it, is that there is a huge difference between the 2008 crisis and this one from an economic point of view. The 2008 crisis was triggered in the banking sector, which had some ripple effects for the real economy because companies had less easy access to credit due to the bad situation of the banks. So it slowed down their development, but from an investment point of view only. This crisis is a demand crisis, a very deep demand crisis because of 2 reasons. The revenues of many potential customers have decreased, and the behaviors of the potential customers and clients has changed, and it will be impacted for the long term. So basically, your main issue going forward will be revenues. It will not be production. It will not be financing. It will be selling. So when you have a board that has no competency in terms of marketing, consumer understanding, and communication, this is a problem because they will not approach the issue with the right lens. So what can you do? Diversify your board. Take in people with different skills, with skills that are now required to handle this crisis. Does it answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, it's giving some points. Absolutely. Thank you, Alexandra.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I think we're reaching the end. Maybe one short question. I see Esmeralda has raised her hand. Esmeralda, if you have, we have time for one short question.
Yes, just jumping on that and going back to Olga and AgroSustain, you mentioned that you had a nice board. Would you maybe restructure it or think otherwise now for the next crisis? Would you wish something had been done differently?
It's a really good question. But to be fair, I think what is important in your board is that they have an open mind actually, and that they are willing to adjust to the changing environment. And as we're still early stage startup, I think for us having a board is a lot of learning, just like for our board members, how to adjust to the new emerging startups and how to adjust to the crises and all the unknown situations. So actually not. I think this crisis gave us a lot of lessons to take into account and to learn from. But I don't think you can actually get really prepared for it, at least not for the first hit. And I think we will be much better for the second one anyway, because we already have it in mind now.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Olga. Thank you, Alexandra, Jean-Michel. Laurent is not with us anymore, but I also want to thank him for these presentations and for sharing your personal views on this topic. Conclusion is that I think you all managed to bring positive aspects of this crisis and also positive roles that the board has, not really seeing them as only pressure or financial controlling. So I think that was a good point. As the last question was quite interesting regarding financial board, with a strategic board. Maybe in the next session we might cover a bit further more the topic of financial boards, because here I think both for Olga and for Laurent, the boards they explain were quite strategic and maybe more supportive than some of the boards of other startups. So this is a topic we might cover on another session. I would like, before ending, to thank again Innovaud for allowing us to have these sessions together, all these people here today to discuss these topics, and hopefully bring some new ideas on how to handle this crisis, and hopefully not the next one, but yeah, we'll see about that. Is there any inputs from our speakers? Anyone would like to share something before we end this session?
Thank you very much for organizing this event. I mean, I'm a big fan of your series because I think it helps us to stay connected during the crisis, but I hope that maybe one day we can do it all together in person.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, and happy to stay in touch. We had many startups, I think, today, and many of the topics that have been discussed are also valid for companies that are no longer startups.
Excellent point. Jean-Michel?
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. I mean, it was a pleasure to see you all, and every week to find you back. And last one will be next week, so be with us.
That's an excellent point. We are next week covering our last topic. We have the innovation manager of Cisco and Nestle and startups that collaborate with them, that will come and explain how to foster relationships with large corporations. Quite interesting for many startups that want to grow at the moment and have collaborations with either these two companies, Nestle and Cisco, or other companies, and understand the type of relationships you can build as a startup and what are the right moves to do, what are the mistakes to avoid. So we will discuss that next week, again in the same format, 1 hour, 50 minutes, a bit more this time as discussion, and we hope to see you all next week for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Antoine.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jean-Michel, Olga, Alexandra. See you soon.
Thank you,
Bye.
Julia.
Thank you. Have a great day.